Hello, and thank you very much for joining me today. I am Dr. Claire Walsh. I'm the Director of Education at the Institute of Analytics, and I'm very happy to have you here with me today. At the Institute of Analytics, we are a professional membership body. We work a lot with partners in higher education to support them, sometimes in delivering data skills for their students and preparing their students for the digital world and employment where AI is now necessary. Sometimes we work with support for ongoing career mentoring and looking after our students on graduation to ensure that when they graduate, they're ready to go into the next best job for them. And we, of course, have an eye on their whole future career. And in this career, the learning never stops. After graduation, there's still a large amount of work to do to get them to, we hope, fellow status with us. But today we're doing something a little different. We have noticed that many of our higher education partners are struggling themselves with data maturity within their university. And so today's webinar is dedicated to supporting faculty and staff who work at universities or any large educational organisation to make sure that they are using the data that they have in the best way possible, and that is adding value to the service that you provide. We've had a lot of questions around this. Frustration is growing where the expectations are increasing, but the payoff, the return on the investment hasn't quite been found. So that's what we'll be looking at today. Right, I hope you can see my slides. I hope you can hear me. So this is what we'll be going through. We'll be going through how you get your data ready. What are the foundations you need in place? Have you got all the right foundations in place? I really hope the answer is yes. Then we will talk about how we work with data as a dialogue. I think where a lot of the frustration is coming from is all these Power BI dashboards, and you're not sure where the data's come from and you're not sure how to use it. So how do we go from that problem to a solution that works for everyone and making it work for you? When we get this right, some amazing things can happen in higher education. And I will share some really best use cases with you to inspire you. So make sure you stick with me to the end where we will be going through some of the amazing things you can do if you get this right at the beginning. Okay, so when we think about data, one really important thing is to see it as a community asset. It does not belong to the IT department. It does not belong to the data analysts. Even if it feels that way, it shouldn't. It is a community asset. It belongs to your university, your community of staff, and we very much hope that it will be built on your institutional values. And when we get this right, when we build our data strategy on institutional values, then we can get all sorts of things done well. We can get the data and AI literacy that the job market is demanding now. Did you know that graduates, whatever subject, hospitality, HR, you name it, 99% of employers and recruiters are looking for students with advanced data and digital skills. 99%. It's not an opt-in, it's not a benefit, it's a problem if you don't have these skills these days. And of course, when we work in higher education, we hope for enhanced services, better outcomes, transparency, so you can report ethically in a way that is aligned to all of your research principles on your own practice. And in turn, even if you don't work in a data field, it provides job security. Being able to work with data and AI is going to help you to protect the subject you love. Data is not a threat to any of the subjects on the higher education spectrum. Even the humanities have digital humanities specializations. If we can embrace it, it's just part of taking that field you love forwards into the future. You don't have to love AI You can hate it, but you have to understand why you hate it. So let's start with very quickly the problem, what I think is the problem. Why are so many people coming to us and they're frustrated, and they need some support and help from us, not just with their graduates, but with actually their colleagues as well. I think one of them is what we call the cynicism trap, that there have been a lot of past projects that have been very busy. They've taken a lot of man hours to build and produce, but actually the results from them have been very disappointing, that people haven't been able to take these projects to reach the happy conclusions that we all hope that they will reach. So that's one area where you may need to be challenged and find solutions to attitudes. Decision fatigue is a really, really big one as well at the moment. AI has really shaken things up, and people are questioning values that they have held for a long time. They're having to revise their plans and the path that they're on. We're planning in January to do a new year, new you. What are your resolutions for 2026? And a lot of that is about, well, I had this plan for my life for the next 5 years, but now AI has interrupted it. Where am I going? What am I doing? And this has led to a lot of decision fatigue, particularly when the data is shared through a Power BI dashboard. That seems to be everyone's frustration. We'll go through why that's a problem, why your Power BI dashboard, as much as I love one, and I do love one, and I do promote them and I use them, it has some problems. In particular, it's often visualization, but without the story that helps us to understand how to make sense of it, how to interpret it, and how to move forwards. So we'll look at that, decision fatigue. And then particularly if you work in the UK or the US or across Europe, some of you have had enough with standardization. If you are a university in the UK, you must report to the government specific data, specific assessments of your performance as a university. And it's very often seen as an external control. It's a compliance issue, and that frustrates and annoys everybody. I have to do this because someone who I'm never going to speak to has told me I have to do this. And that's, of course, going to be really, really frustrating. If we're focusing on data as a compliance issue and not as a means of delivering better service, I know that's what you all care about, then it is going to lead to a lot of tension and failed projects as well. So these are the problems that we're trying to address. And I've got lots of lovely solutions for you and some really big picture thinking. I know across the world, higher education has been through a difficult time financially for many sectors in terms of what they teach. Over in America, there's a lot of controversy and a lot of control over higher education. And it's just been a time of tremendous change. Can we make it better? And I think the answer is, of course, we can. We can always find ways to improve and make and secure our futures. So first point, get your data ready. This is the foundation of all data work. You can't do anything with rubbish data. And I think your colleagues all understand this. I think everyone in your university knows the value of high quality data. And particularly when it relates to their roles, they understand what they can do with it. So there are 3 steps to getting your data ready. I think the first one is to start with your data strategy. What would you like to do with this data? Beyond compliance, what would you like to do with this particular data set? Do you have the data you need? Do you need to collect more data? Is the data that you're collecting the right data to achieve your goals? If you have no goal in mind, there's no point bothering to collect data to improve your service. It's not going to happen. And so you need to start thinking, well, if I had really amazing estates data on all of the rooms and the buildings that belong to my university, we could create a really good automated room booking system. And it could be flexible and it would help us to reschedule and move things around. It might help us to identify times in the day when we have estate value that's not being used. Perhaps we could rent that out as another source of income. Perhaps we could host conferences. That would be the value of estates data on, the buildings and properties. You might have an online master's program, for example, that's bringing in incredible value. It's making your educational standards and training available to a community that for many, many reasons would be excluded because they live in a remote place, because they are working, because they are parents and they can't physically turn up at the university at that time for their lectures. So online provision is just a wonderful thing. And you might say, well, let's get some data on online engagement. So we can review, we can improve the quality of it. And again, I think part of your strategy is to identify, well, what actually is meaningful in online engagement. A very obvious minimum would be 0. If somebody has 0 engagement, then that's a clear red flag. That's a warning sign that things have gone wrong. But then at the same time, if someone's online engaging all day, then that looks a little bit suspicious as well. That looks like they've perhaps just opened up the portal and left it on and walked away, made a cup of tea, gone to watch the telly, done something else. So there's probably a sweet spot in there between 0 engagement and troublingly too much engagement. What does that look like? Can you have a discussion with your education team? Can you do a little study to make sure that you're making the right goals for that particular data set, that you know how to align what you want from that data to your end strategy, your end goal? And we'll come in a minute just to see if I can expand your strategy, if I can encourage you to think of the bigger picture here. So before you do anything, just have that conversation about your strategy. It may change. In fact, if you have a 5-year plan, a 5-year strategy, I expect it to change, quite honestly. I don't expect it to be static. I expect you to be taking decisions, correcting mistakes that assumptions that you made at the beginning. When you start getting more information in, I would expect you to be evolving that data strategy, but still you have that overall goal in mind. Step number 2, sort your governance. So governance has become standardized reporting for external authorities. So for example, here in the UK, HESA is a higher education overseeing organization that requires data on finance to check that money is being managed responsibly, graduate outcomes, student satisfaction surveys to ensure that the delivery of education is being managed responsibly. Lots of things that actually are controls on you as an organization. And so that's standardization. And when we say standardization, what we mean is every university in the country will use the same fields for the same concept or idea. So HESA will say, this is what we call a full-time course. This is the number of hours that they must be studying as a minimum to be a full-time course. How many students do you have in a full-time course? This is what we define as a part-time course. A part-time course is anything less than XYZ, more than XYZ. So it's got to be more than 20 hours, less than 30 hours a week contact time. And everyone around the country agrees that's the definition of full-time and part-time, and we're all going to use the same. Now, we could go a little further than that. We could say, okay, that's what we have to report. Is there anywhere else we could possibly align our provision? And I'm thinking particularly here between faculties. Having worked in higher education, I know faculties are terrible at following the same procedure. They all have their own little unique ways of doing things that evolved from small groups developing their own ideas and not coming together, perhaps as much as you would if you were working for a private corporation. Aligned data means we've all seen the value in this. We all recognize how valuable it is if we all have the same definition of a course or a student. Now, you might think everybody knows what a student is, everybody knows what a course is. When you actually come down to defining, well, for them to be a student, if they turn up for a weekend workshop, does that make them a student? If they only register for a standard qualification, like a degree, a bachelor's degree, does that make them a student? What if they don't actually see that bachelor's degree through to maturity? There are lots of questions that need to be agreed before we can move forwards with some really amazing data strategies. So it's kind of twofold. Standardization is just this idea that all the different areas of your organization, all the different functions will be using the same basic principles of data. Your library services, your lecture educational content, there will be facilities that you offer, social facilities, food, catering, those kinds of facilities. There will be lecture hall and property usage. There'll be your IT system. There are lots and lots of different systems that you have across your university. Has every one of those, finance, of course, I'm missing out finance, admissions, has every single one of those had the conversation where you actually agree that you're talking about the same thing? You're using common formats. You've got a dictionary of what each word means, and have you agreed it across the different systems? You will be amazed how difficult it is to achieve this. Ask anyone who's done it. So that's the place to begin. Why do this? Why clean it up? Well, we have a wonderful case study now that has been in operation for several years, actually. This is not new. It's overseen by the SURF organization in the Netherlands, SURF, surfing like California surfing. And it's a group of 4 universities that didn't just align within the university, all those services I've just mentioned, they decided to align between themselves. They actually didn't just have that conversation within the university, they had it across all 4 universities. And so now they're using all the same terminology, their data tables all look identical, and they're all collecting data in the same way. They can do their own thing, but there are if there's an area that overlaps, then they've all used the same, we call it a schema. It's a list of rules for the data set. Why bother? Well, if you are a student in any one of these 4 universities today, you can take your degree in one, but if there's a lecturer you love, you can pop across to the other one for the afternoon and take a course there and come back, and it all counts towards the same degree. And there's less of an obligation on the students to pick. When they select your university, maybe they're selecting the name and reputation of the university. Often they're selecting the course and the course contents, and it aligns with what they want, but they have to compromise very often, because this university offers amazing practical support, but that university offers really great lecturers who are all esteemed, and this other university has some really good projects. And so they have to make that difficult choice. It's just all in one. You have to go to this one university, and whatever services they provide, that's what you have to do. These guys, their students are going they're going not all over the place, but they have that flexibility built into their degree that if there is something that they love from the other university, they can go there for the afternoon, for the morning, come back, go to their regular classes. So they're still getting that sense of belonging to their main university, but they're building their unique profile and really adding value when they come to graduate. Imagine you're an employer and you have a student sat in front of you who said, I decided this was the profile I needed to be best in my job, and I actively went out and found it. You'd recruit that person. And it shows, it gives them amazing power. And of course, it's a big selling point. It attracts more students because they love the proposal. And it also provides them with the ability to integrate perhaps with some of other educational providers, FE colleges, further education, slightly below higher education, to offer services for business training. They can integrate easily with corporations, with their CPD, with their professional data training. So it opens up all sorts of services that they can sell as well. And I know many universities today are looking at the balance sheet very, very worried. This is a way forwards. Here's another reason to standardize. If I haven't persuaded you with that one, I'm sure this one will win you over. You care, I know, as university lecturers, you care about accessibility. You want to make sure that nobody is turned away from your university course because they don't have the right physical abilities to be able to attend. They have a learning difference that can't be accommodated. The blind, perhaps if you're trying to, if you are visually impaired, and you are trying to access a website, it can be very challenging. And there's been a lot of work built up to make sure that actually the internet is a welcoming place to all. You care about this. WCAG, this is the this is a format that makes sure that all of your digital offerings are available to people using digital readers or all sorts of assistive technologies. It's the standards were introduced by the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium. They've been working on this for decades to make the internet a fair and welcoming place. In America, it's actually required. All websites need to be compliant and accessible. It's the right to browse over in the US, which is a wonderful law. I wish it was global. And it means that you have to make sure that forms are accessible, that a digital reader can find the information. If it's stuck in a PDF, it can't. If it's stuck in an image, it can't. If it's stuck in a video, it can't. There are lots of reasons why it might be difficult for a machine reader to find the information. If there's something like an application form, that's particularly challenging because people need to be able to know what information is being asked for, know where to put it, know what the options are. If it's a drop-down menu, you've got to read those out. So forms are particularly challenging. And I think many of you care about this. You want your courses to be accessible. You don't want to exclude. And you probably have a mandate to do it as well from the government. The wonderful thing about becoming WCAG compliant, it's the right thing to do. But also an additional benefit is that actually, once you become WCAG compliant, you immediately have a superpower. All of your content online is machine readable. That's basically what it means. And once all of your content is machine readable, then suddenly it is actually available to AI tools and all sorts of other things that can really help speed up your ability to use the data and to get solutions quickly. So it's just a win-win situation, making sure that digital services are WCAG compliant. And I was shocked. I looked at this 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I was shocked that actually hardly any universities here in the UK are fully WCAG compliant. A good one is about 80% compliant. That's not good enough. That's just not good enough. So this is why we standardize. It just allows us to do things we care about once we get our governance in place. Another benefit of having governance in place is it has to belong to everyone. It can't belong just to the IT team. All of us who work in higher education need to own responsibility for governance. It has to be an everyone's skill, just like GDPR is an everyone's skill. Everyone who works in your organization has to do annual GDPR training and retraining, because everyone is responsible. It's the same thing with your data governance and your standards and maintaining data quality. Right. So make sure your colleagues are trained. This is the final part. Higher education traditionally has said there are people who are quantitative researchers and there are people who are qualitative researchers, and that's absolutely fine for them to specialize, and we won't make them all do the same thing. I think there are huge disadvantages to that, massive, massive disadvantages to that. All data needs human oversight. All human insight needs data oversight. These two are not separable. So data can tell us what a problem is. It might be able to tell us where a problem is. Experts will be able to tell us why that problem has occurred or what the potential solution is. You cannot have just a data expert and just a subject specialist expert. It does not work. I can tell you this because I moved from being a subject specialist expert in assessment to a data expert, and so I read reports from both sides, and I can tell you now sometimes when they were just one-sided, they were terrible. So data and AI literacy are now essential skills for everyone. There's no question. If I can share lots and lots of data with you on this, employers are looking for these skills, just as saying I can't use email is just unacceptable these days. Saying I have no idea about data is becoming equally problematic. And also, once your colleagues are trained, then it enables all sorts of other things. The governance work, they can input into that, maintaining quality. The strategy work, they can input into that, setting the goals and the strategies. And they will stop complaining about Power BI dashboards and start doing something useful with it. I love a dashboard. I use them all the time. I think they're amazing. For me personally, they help me to spot where problems might be. But having said that, if somebody gives me a new dashboard, I immediately have a list of questions I would ask about that dashboard. Where did the data come from? How did you collect it? How did you clean it? What did you filter out? Have you removed anything? Have you done any checks to make sure that it does measure what you're saying it measures? I would have a lot of questions I would immediately ask, and then I look at it. And so this is one of the big challenges with Power BI. There are several things wrong with it. The big one is it's often black boxed. It's often presented to the user as a done deal. Here is the visualization. Don't ask me any questions about how I created it. And that's unacceptable. I'll always ask to go in and have a look myself. Please, can I have access? As long as it's black boxed, when we say black boxed in data, it means nobody can see it, nobody can inspect it, nobody can question or challenge it. That's really problematic. Add to that a GDPR kind of promoted concept of data ownership. It's this idea that there's one person responsible, one person who has to look after that data set, one person who has to answer to problems, which we have developed thanks to GDPR. We've developed the sense that somebody qualified needs to oversee this process. But these two together create a rather negative situation, particularly where data stewardship is really challenging, because data stewardship means you put that data in the hands of people who could find it useful, and you enable them to do good work with that data. And it's these two are in conflict with that overall goal. So this is one reason why we want to make sure that your colleagues are all confident. They don't feel intimidated by data, and many do. They don't feel frustrated that the figures have come from nowhere. We need to make sure that roles are supported. So what I'm proposing is not like a HESA control. You must submit this by the last day of the month, every month, and if you don't, you'll get a series of angry emails becoming more and more angry. That's not helping us. What we do want is this idea of the data marketplace. Actually, here is a whole load of really amazing data. It's clean, it's versioned, so you know when it was cleaned up and how it was cleaned up. And you can go back if you want to the raw data. Ideally, it's available through an API. Once it goes out in a downloaded Excel file, it becomes a little problematic. Accessing data through an online portal shouldn't be that hard. We've got lots of no-code solutions, or even if you have to access it with code, I promise you that SQL, the code we use to access it, is so easy. It's a few lines, a few words each line. You can't go wrong using it. Well, you can go wrong when you're learning, but because you forgot a comma or because you forgot this, but it's the easiest coding on the planet to have to do. But many universities will provide this anyway without, they'll provide a human word interface for this, so you don't have to worry. So make that data available to people to use. Give them the option of using tools they prefer. If they really hate Power BI, let them use other tools that they feel more comfortable with. Excel, which is, I often have rude things to say about Excel just because it's designed for playing around and experimenting. It's not really a data analyst tool. But if that's what they feel comfortable with, let them. It's better that they're using Excel, fully knowing perhaps some of the limitations, than not using it at all, or Google Sheets, or Tableau, or whatever tool it is that they prefer to use. Many of them will be more comfortable perhaps with statistical solutions like Stata or those more traditional mathematical tools. And then just make sure that there are rules in place. Who can access the data? We're not making it available to anyone and everyone. That there will be some controls on who's got it, tracking who's got it, what they're doing with it. Just making sure that your ethics are in place. You know how to do this anyway. You've got research projects through ethics committees, so you know what you're doing. You don't need me to tell you that. And then once we've done all of this, this is when you can start to make it work for you. This is when you can start to think about where you would like to go, what you would like to do with it, and actually do, achieve the dream we all hope you're going to achieve. So it stops becoming a burden, a frustrating regulatory compliance, and it just supports you in making decisions anywhere you would like to make improvements. So this is things like, when I say an assessment project, I don't mean necessarily educational assessment. I mean your student satisfaction survey. That is an assessment of your services. Your graduate outcomes, that is an assessment of your services. Your scorecard, that is, do you have a scorecard for your graduate outcomes? Those kinds of things. Another place you can go, you can close the loop on feedback very quickly. This year's data should improve this year's services. So unless you have that data marketplace that I mentioned set up, you are going to find it more challenging to get solutions at the speed you need to get them. It's no good looking at last year's data and say, oh, this went a bit wrong. Your IT department are really good at this. They know the feedback comes in and they have to make changes. But at the same time, if attendance is low in week 3, it's only going to go downhill from there. So you need to be taking action week 3.5 to see if you can improve that. So we want to close that loop on getting feedback and reacting to it. As an organization, can you define actionable metrics that you can work on? I think having one number is not terribly useful, but if you can have a minimum, the value for this must not drop below 10%, or it must not go above 90%, whether we're talking about attendance or anything like that. If it goes above or below those figures, it will trigger an immediate response. So, for example, room occupation, resource use, those kinds of things. If your resources, your devices, your machines are not being used, that triggers a response. If they're overused, if you've got no spares and no extra, that triggers a response from finance to see if you can deliver more. We can remove some of those frustration points. A lot of it is about getting this assessment data in. So it's who's attending, how are they attending, are they happy? Some departments will regularly deliver slowly. Some departments will regularly hold the whole process up. And this, I think, is an opportunity for you to identify those bottlenecks. If you have a department that's really slow at submitting their data, their research, for example, recording their research contributions or their contributions to policy development or their contributions to business and corporate partnership. If you have an individual that's holding it up, then let's identify them. Let's get on their backs. And then finally, of course, if going back to this idea of inclusion, if you have got the data, then you can start to create more customized, accessible, welcome materials for students based on their specific course enrollment, their specific needs. And this kind of customized thing, completes the loop. We started off with universities, departments doing things too individually, going their own way a little bit too much. We talked about standardization, and now we're bringing it back to, well, we standardize so that we can then also personalize. We have a blog coming out next week, actually, for those of you who are looking at predictive analytics. We have a blog coming out on Thursday about how you take aggregate data, about a billion data points on a student, and use that to predict whether one individual personal student will struggle or not, and what will work to support them and identify them. I think that's the next step after all of this. How do we work with predictive analytics well? How do we go from a billion data points to a piece of advice for one particular person or department? So there are two ways of doing this. You can start with your problem first, or you can start with your data first. If you want to start with the problem first approach, then you have an instinct that this is causing a problem with attendance. You have an instinct that this is why the students aren't getting the grades that they need. You have an instinct that this is why they're not getting the jobs that they need. Then you have that instinct based on your experience, based on your specialist knowledge, and you have to go away and find data to see if there's anything that can help you refine that feeling. Does the data confirm what you're saying? Does it contradict? And stay really open to this, because most of us prefer and value data that confirms and totally ignore the data that contradicts it. When you've done that, then treat any data as possibly erroneous. Always entertain the possibility that something has gone wrong. If you still feel this data looks off, this data doesn't look correct, this data doesn't look helpful, keep that in mind. Don't get overconfident because the data agrees with you. I can promise you from experience, so many things can go wrong in a data process. Then, with all that in place, you start to solve your problem. So you start to take whatever action you need to take to improve graduate outcomes. Your expertise should guide you through the interpretation and implementation. So this is your experience and knowledge should be your main guide at that point. And it should help you to say, this is not working, let's change direction. This is having negative impact that we didn't anticipate, let's change direction. But then, or this is fantastic, this is working amazingly well. Always then bring data back into the process to check your instinct, to check that feeling. Just bring the data back in to measure the effectiveness of whatever change it is that you've implemented. So that's how we go from a problem first approach. Now you may be the other way around. You may have the data and you're not too sure what to do with it. and this is very common. We've collected all this data. How do we use it? You don't need to go away and buy more tools. You don't need to go away, you don't need to buy anything more. It's all about building a culture where you can use that data. If you have data that's not being used, you need to build up the culture in your organization. Pick a service, pick just one service improvement that you would like to make, and find 2 data sets that you need to help you make an improvement in that. So if it's your estates data, you're going to be looking at information on the rooms. What facilities do they have? What digital technology is in each room? What physical capacity do they have? That would be one data set. Timetables would be another obvious data set. Clean it and then involve everyone in saying, well, we've got this data, how can we use it to improve the use of our facilities? How can we use it to improve the maintenance of all of those digital tech tools that you've got in each lecture hall, those kinds of things. And make sure together you're not just implementing the change, but together you're measuring the impact, and then everyone can see what's going on. So I hope this gives you a way forward beyond the frustration that I know many universities are feeling. Make sure your data that you collect is clean, it's compliant, that foundation of quality is non-negotiable and everybody understands it. Make sure as well that data is treated as a resource for interaction. It's a way of discussing the services and how you can improve them. Maybe data is not the solution, but it's there as part of the discussion in every interaction that you have. And whenever you have an assessment, again, assessment in the broadest sense, we have enough money. That would be an assessment. We don't have enough money. That would be an assessment. Then every assessment is connected back to a service change that you deliver. And if you're able to do that, hopefully we can get more successful uses of data.
Thank you for watching. The Institute of Analytics is the global membership body for data professionals. Learn more by following us on LinkedIn, Facebook or Instagram, or visit our website now. The links are in the description.